got to give yourself time to think, to step away from the tasks, because the tasks will consume you and you'll never make the right strategic decisions, including how you're using digital tools. It sounds trite, but it's so true. Put it on your calendar, time to just stop and sit back and think about your business and think about what you ought to be doing differently in your day-to-day. So, giving yourself that freedom is really critical, I think.
Alibaba.com E-commerce Academy is the official podcast from the Alibaba.com team. Each week on the show, we bring you conversations with industry-leading experts who are using Alibaba.com to build and scale their businesses. These conversations help you explore opportunities through digital global sourcing amidst changing times and find diversified winning products and leading suppliers on Alibaba.com. Subscribe and be sure to check back for regular episodes.
This is Mike, and welcome back to another edition of the Alibaba.com E-commerce Academy podcast. It is so great to be back for another season working with Alibaba.com. Had a lot of fun last time as well. You can also find me over at another podcast, the Ecom Crew Podcast. Been doing that for almost 500 episodes. So if you want to hear more about e-commerce, you can also find me out over there. And with that, I've been doing e-commerce since 2012 and sharing my journey there and here and interviewing lots of really cool people. It's been a fun journey. And today is no exception. We have Brian Beck on the show today. Brian, welcome to the Alibaba.com E-commerce Academy podcast.
Hey, Mike, it's great to be here. Thanks for having me. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely. These things always sound like they come off without a hitch because of a great team behind the scenes, but we had some tech issues and here we are. Hopefully this one will come off without a hitch. It's great to be chatting with you again. Before we get too deep into the podcast episode today, let me just give you an opportunity to introduce yourself and tell people that are listening who you are and what you do.
Yeah, well, hey, thanks again, Mike, for having me. My name is Brian Beck. I've been in the e-com field for, 22 years, since the inception of e-commerce, I think, 1999. So I've been both as a business owner running e-commerce and building companies in this field, as well as an executive running e-commerce at larger companies like Harbor Freight Tools and PacSun. These days, I'm very focused on B2B, Mike. I wrote a book called $1 Billion B2B E-commerce. I have a thought leadership series called Master B2B, where we work with companies and help them understand their opportunities both on the buy and the sell side in using e-commerce to transform their business. So I'm really excited to be here on your podcast with Alibaba.com and obviously a very important player in this industry. So really excited to talk to another practitioner. You spend a lot of time in this field yourself, so.
Yeah, but you're like the OG, man. I mean, back in 1999, I was just out of school and working at a gas station or something. I don't know, but that was a long time ago. I was ready for the world to end in the year 2000.
Right.
With the 2-digit date thing.
That's right. Y2K.
I have a funny story about that.
Mm-hmm.
It was. I mean, looking back, I was actually that year I was in an IT job, and my boss didn't know IT at all. So I reported to a COO, and he was convinced that the world was coming to an end and I should be there on New Year's Eve. And I was like, heck with that. I'm going up to New York City and going to Times Square. And so that's how I spent that New Year's Eve. It was a fun time.
No question.
So you mentioned you're doing B2B e-commerce. Let's talk a little bit about the particulars and what makes things different in B2B versus B2C.
Well, this is the whole reason I got into B2B, and I was in the consumer side of e-commerce for many years. Most of my 17 years as a practitioner was building businesses in B2C e-commerce. B2B is what's fascinating about it, Mike, is it's still so far behind where B2C is today, but there's so much opportunity both on the buy and the sell side for companies to transform how they do business, and there's so much return on investment involved in it and everything else, but ultimately there's a lot of the same fundamentals that apply in B2B. If you think about, who the buyer is today for a B2B transaction or who the seller is, these folks are digital natives. In fact, 75% of the buyers within just a year or two are going to be millennials. The folks moving into buying roles, and they expect, these buyers, the folks that are listening today, they expect a B2C-like experience from their B2B suppliers. They're informed by, experiences with Alibaba.com, Amazon, other places, and they're coming onto their suppliers' websites expecting to have a frictionless digital experience to transact and to relate to these companies. So there's value to the buyer, there's value to the seller in enabling those, those transactions to happen digitally. And there's enormous efficiencies to be gained. And the companies that realize this on the sell side are achieving great efficiency. And those who use and ingrain really that into their supply chain as well and how they're doing business, the digital, ways to interact, are also benefiting through efficiency and creating competitive advantage for their business. I've done this with my own businesses, and it's really exciting to see this now come to the B2B side. That's the whole reason I got into it, because there's just so much opportunity. It's enormous, the transformation that can occur in businesses when they use digital as a part of their B2B process, right?
Yeah. When I think back to that old corporate job I was talking about in 1999, and just the evolution of e-commerce in general, when I think about e-commerce evolving on the B2C side, it's very much people getting out of the malls, getting out of the strip centers, and going to a .com and purchasing. When I think about B2B, I think back to these salespeople that would show up at the office with a catalog of paper clips and rubber bands, or we had a haberdasher that even came by. We used to get a gift certificate for that for suits. The guy that would sell you the toner cartridges, the phone system, all this different stuff. There were salespeople in the office all the time. Versus, like you said, a millennial has no tolerance for that. They don't want to talk to somebody. They want you to text them instead of showing up in person, kind of thing, right? Whatever it is. And so they want to buy all that stuff online and go about their day, and they can care less about that relationship. Where I think life was all about relationships, and unfortunately we're kind of losing that. But if you ignore the fact that the world's changing, then you get left behind.
100%. It's interesting. COVID accelerated a lot of the things that were already happening around this. And I get this question all the time, Mike. Is this a death of a salesperson, right? Is the old Arthur Miller book? You think about, does this mean sales people, physical selling relationships are dead? I argue that no, they're not dead, right? The person calling on you, bringing the selling you paper clips in your office. Some of the commodity or sort of the repeated tasks or the stuff where the millennial doesn't have patience for, calling a call center or faxing in something. Oh my goodness. What is a fax? What is a fax machine? But a lot of those, there's huge benefit to digitizing some of the more, what I'll call commodity tasks or routine tasks or reordering or finding suppliers, that really meet your need. A lot of that can be done through digital means now. And what's happened is, and what I observe in my day-to-day business working with all kinds of different companies, is that, a lot of the more valuable tasks, the more consultative things the sales team can deliver, those still exist. If I have questions about, how to install something, or how do I use this thing in my business, or how do I, if you're a buyer and you need consultation, that's a great use of a physical sales asset. But if I know what I want, get out of my way. I'm a millennial. Get out of my way. I'm going to source this and do it efficiently and be done. One of the central theses in my book is removing friction from the buying cycle. Removing friction from the supply chain is critical. And when companies do that well, like in Alibaba.com does, when you go to the site and you can find things, you can find supply, et cetera, that's where you get, the real benefit from digital. I know what I want. I'm a millennial. I'm going to go in. I'm going to search. I'm going to find it. I'm going to get it quickly. It might be from a new supplier too. The other thing I'll mention, Mike, during COVID, 50% of buyers bought things from suppliers they'd never transacted with before. And it was out of necessity, because some companies, they weren't prepared for sort of this inability to call on people that are not in an office, right? So I'm sitting in my home. I need to source something through digital channels. Well, guess what? I'm going to have to buy that from a different supplier. And guess what? Those suppliers are now benefiting from being, in those marketplaces, in those places where they could be found digitally, because the statistic is that, 30% of people are still going to be working from home at the start of next year. This is not going away. This remote sourcing, this remote digital interaction with salespeople, all this, it's here to stay forever. So if you're a seller, if you're not prepared for that, you're risking your very, relevance in your business. So yes, I definitely argue that e-commerce is an important element of any business these days.
Yeah. And I think, the pandemic just really accelerated what was inevitable anyway, right? I mean, I think that working from home was kind of like this inevitable thing, but everyone was so scared to be the first one to either require it or suggest it, or wonder how teams would actually work remotely. But when you think about it, I mean, the internet infrastructure is gotten so good now that you can work almost as effectively from home. There's no question that the in-person time is super important. We've moved ourselves to like this hybrid setup where people come in once a week, required to come into one office once a week. I just look out for their well-being because I do think that humans are social animals and need to have some in-person interaction of some sort. It helps with like team camaraderie and other things. But like, who needs to sit in traffic 5 days a week and have expensive clothing to go into the office and go find lunch someplace and sit in traffic to get back home and all these other factors and all the wasted time of having some coworker come talk to you at the water cooler and all this stuff, even though again it helps with other factors.
Right.
So I think these things are things that were probably going to happen eventually. It just kind of accelerated it, and also the way that businesses buy stuff, it just accelerates it. If there was ever a flimsy relationship of having someone come physically sell you something, this really kind of cements the fact that they're no longer needed. I mean, and it's sad. I mean, there's lots of things that progress, and when you look back at things 100 years ago, you don't give it much thought. It's like, there's no need for the horse and buggy driver any longer, but we don't give that much thought. But when it's today's taxi driver or truck driver that's going to lose their job to automation, or the factory line guy who will lose their job to automation, or the salesperson that used to come by who's no longer really going to have a job, that might have been doing this for 25 or 30 years and is 5 or 10 years away from retirement and is just becoming irrelevant in that position. It's tough. I mean, it's sad. Like, this is what happens in society, but you can't ignore it. Like, this is something that's here to stay.
There's a great book. I don't know if you've read it. It's called Good to Great by Jim Collins. And one of the things that I cite this in my own book several times. One of the things that Jim said is you need to confront the businesses that are exceeding their peers in terms of, enterprise value and all the rest, growth. They confront the brutal reality of their situation, right? And that's, the term is kind of, I like how he says that, because what that means is really in this context is that businesses need to confront the fact that ultimately the world has changed, right? And these are not comfortable changes. And when we talk about B2B companies, both, folks who are transacting and buying as well as those who are selling, both sides of the equation, understanding that, some of these roles are changing and evolving and are becoming digital processes. And if you're not embracing some of these things, you will fall behind your competitors. It's interesting. I recently visited with a machine tools company, right? It was with the CEO, and he's digitizing some of the things that he's doing in his business. He took me into a room, and he said, it was a big, open room. I said, what are you doing with this area? He was telling me that he's taking some of the folks who used to do some of the manual process you were describing, sales, calling on people, et cetera. He said, I'm repurposing my folks because I've introduced e-commerce process into my supply chain, into my sales cycle, et cetera. And I'm repurposing people because I'm now able to grow my business using these digital channels. And I'm giving these folks a new role. So he's not laying people off. And, this isn't, again, the death of a salesperson. It's changing the way that they're doing business. They're becoming more strategic. He's using them as now strategic account reps, where they're going out and they're calling on their customers and talking to them about their business. And from that, he expects to get, new types of business, other places he can help his customers, et cetera. And he's turning his folks into more strategic assets for his business, rather than saying, oh, well, I don't need them to take orders anymore on the phone because some of this is moving over to e-com. So it's interesting how some of the businesses are thinking about this evolution. But at the end of the day, confronting the reality of change is really critical. And that includes staying in front of your customers, listing product on Alibaba.com if you're selling, for example, if you're a supplier, or using these marketplaces as places to go and save time and make your process more efficient. So,
yeah, absolutely. So switching gears here, I'm just kind of thinking through in my world and selling directly to consumers, and the things that are trigger points for them. It's typically, if you have like a brand affinity, you think about something like Coach or Nike or something where people are really care about brand. They care about price. Returns are usually a big thing. Trust with a business, being good customer service. There's a list of like 10 of these things. Where do things rank? Or are things different, or is it the same? So I would imagine it's a different set of circumstances for B2B. And what are those things?
Well, it's interesting. This is a great topic because, getting to really loyalty, and traditionally in B2B, loyalty has been with relationships, right? So you described the person coming by the office to sell office supplies, right? Your WB Mason guy or whatever. I think that COVID has challenged loyalty in all new ways, right? And I cited the statistic earlier, 50% of people buying from new suppliers, right? And moving. So what I'm seeing emerge is, again, I don't think that loyalty is dead. Okay. I don't think that, you talk about brand loyalty, it's loyalty to a person, loyalty to a brand, et cetera. But what I do think is happening is we're seeing more loyalty emerge to channel. And what I mean by channel is Alibaba.com. It's a channel, right? It's a way to sell. It's a place that if there's trust established with the channel, that's an opportunity for suppliers and buyers to get in front and use these channels. And the trust comes in the fulfillment. It comes in the fact that these folks are vetted. There's requirements. Here's another interesting statistic for you, Mike. 65. This is I think it was Digital Commerce 360 did this study. And the fact is that 65% of people, consumers and B2B buyers, will buy from a marketplace, from a brand that they don't know. So think about that for a moment. What is that? 65% of people, because they trust the marketplace experience. If something goes wrong with the order, the marketplace will take care of, the issue. 65% of people. So if I'm a seller of product, I'm a manufacturer, and I'm a new manufacturer and I want to enter, a new market or introduce a new product or reach customers that I haven't reached before, I can use a marketplace to do that. And the marketplace trust will come into my, it will layer onto me or be a halo effect. I can reach new customers that way. And if I'm a buyer, I can buy with confidence knowing that this, if I don't know the brand, I can buy there and I'll be taken care of. I'm not risking my job by buying there. So if you think about those things, that creates both opportunity. It also creates a competitive change for companies that have been in, relied on that loyalty for so long between the salesperson and the person buying in a B2B setting. So the world's changing, right? Confronting the brutal reality. And I think channel has emerged as another place where people are putting loyalty beyond the brand, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it makes perfect sense. And I would think that, the biggest factors for a business are, is the thing in stock and can I get it quickly? Those types of things, because, you got a job to do. Your boss is breathing down your neck. Your biggest thing is just like, I just need to check this box and move on to the next thing. And other factors, whether you've done business with them before, is probably not as big of a thing. The price of it probably isn't as big of a thing because it's not your money. It's someone else's money. I mean, most people I would hope would not just go spend it foolishly, but they're probably not as diligent as they would be if it was their own. And so it's just like, I want this thing quickly. If it's got a problem, I want to be able to like return it and fix the problem quickly. And isn't in stock, and can I get it like today or tomorrow?
That's a great, Mike, another great point, right? One of the key differences, and I talk about this in my book as well, one of the key differences between B2C and B2B is that when people are in their role for B2B buying and using it digitally, using digital channels, it's all about efficiency. They want to do their job more quickly. On the B2C side, it's hey, can I, do I like this latest Nike sneaker or whatever? Let me go down this immersive journey to see if I identify with the lifestyle and, it's more of a shopping for fun. That's not B2B. B2B is get me to what I need quickly and get out of my way, or eliminate all the friction using the same kinds of things, search, navigation, et cetera. Get out of my way though. Let me buy it and get my job done, right? So the companies that deliver that and the buyers that take advantage of that are realizing tremendous ROI, in terms of capturing new customers on the sell side and on the buy side, saving time, being more efficient with their job. And it's a key difference between the two. And this also has loyalty implications. I mean, what you're saying, I mean, someone buys for their business, they don't care about rewards points that go to the company necessarily unless they own the company. So there's different implications for loyalty there as well.
Supply chain disruptions can cause significant delays to product orders. However, with the on-time delivery service from Alibaba.com, your B2B orders are protected in the case of any delay. On Alibaba.com, you can find around 30 million products that have a guaranteed deliver-by dates. And should there be a delay, you'll be compensated for up to 10% of the order amount with a maximum amount of $100. Terms and conditions apply. Learn more about the on-time delivery guarantee and other great tips at buyer.alibaba.com.
Yeah, there's a really prominent company that sells various stuff for businesses. I'll leave their name out of it just, to be safe here. You never know. But like their program is like the loyalty stuff all goes to the buyer. So like you buy X dollars, you get a free hat. You buy, more dollars, you get a shirt. But like some of the stuff, the rewards are pretty nice, and it all is designed to go directly to the person, the purchasing person in that department, and circumvent the actual owner of the business, which is a little shady in some respects. As I look at it from the business owner's perspective. Right. I don't want the person that's making the buying decisions to be tempted by a free hat, which I know they will be. But it's also brilliant when you think about it from a business perspective. Kudos to the company that does this, and they're very well known. People probably know who I'm talking about. Just we'll leave them off the podcast.
Well, it's interesting. Yeah. And again, I'm working with a lot of B2B companies, depending on the business model, whether it's a manufacturer, distributor, et cetera. There are different ways to create those kinds of programs, which, at the end of the day, if you own a P&L at a business, if you're an owner or if you're a manager of a business, if it improves your P&L, the loyalty aspect, whether if that's some kind of a lot of companies will have ad rebates, or they'll have certain co-op benefits that they'll provide to their buyers. If I'm a buyer, as long as if it's improving my P&L, it's one layer I see where it's pretty effective in helping those companies to improve the P&L, because ultimately they're measured by that, right? And if I'm a business owner, I'm certainly measured by that. But if I'm someone sitting in the company, there are other perks like you described that companies will offer. I see often, like events and trips and things like that. They go to the people who are doing the buying, right? And they may or may not be the business owner per se. So yeah, I think there is a fine line there a bit. You got to be a little careful with it, but at the end of the day, those things work. They do help with loyalty for sure.
Yeah, absolutely.
And they can be delivered digitally too, right? So.
Yeah, absolutely. So shifting that conversation again just a little bit here, I want to be respectful of your time. We're already in the back third of this episode, and I always like to have some impact in a podcast rather than just a great conversation with it, which has been so far. Thinking through things when you think about B2B and just things moving forward, what are like the pillars of success to this? 3, 4, 5 things. Some of them may be things you've already discussed, but I want people that are in their car driving right now or at the gym with this in their ears to have a couple takeaways of this is what I need to be thinking about and focusing on. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, boom. What are those things?
Right. So depending on what your situation is, I think the first thing you have to recognize is that the world is changing. So, and it's interesting, a couple years ago, I think it was Digital Commerce 360 did a study and said, why aren't you digitizing? Why aren't you using digital tools? What are the things holding you back? And the number one thing was that the leadership of the company, whether you're a business owner or within a larger company, wasn't on board with making the right kinds of investments to move the business forward and to recognize the brutal reality of what's changing. So number one, if you're a business owner, I think you need to look at and recognize that the world has changed. And it sounds sort of, trite, but it's the number one thing that's holding companies back. So I think number one, you have to recognize, that change. I think number two is then taking action on it. I think the number one thing you have to look at there is if you're a seller of product, understanding what the customer wants from you. You got to put the, customer at the center. If you look at the most successful businesses in e-commerce, they're out involving customers in every decision they make. So again, coming from the sell side, understanding what those customers want from you from an e-commerce perspective, and then actually funding it and putting the right resources behind it. Too often companies will rely on, they won't fund it enough and they won't give the right resourcing, and that includes getting out and being on marketplaces as a place to stay relevant to your customer as more and more search volume happens there, et cetera. Now, if I'm on the buy side, I need to be taking action and looking at using these new digital tools and channels to inform my business and to use it as a sourcing tool. So, for example, in my business, I use digital tools all the time. I'm a small business owner, right? So I use digital tools all the time to resource, to find resources to do work for me. There's a variety of sources for that, as well as using digital sources like Alibaba.com to find suppliers, to find new sources of product that can save me time, right? So I think confronting the reality that the world is digitized and getting out of your routine. And it sounds, again, kind of trite, but it's true. You have to get out of your routine in order to take advantage of these tools. Number three thing I would say is you got to give yourself time as a business owner to actually think about these things. You can get so caught up. I've learned this, having started a number of businesses in my career, and you know this too, Mike, right? You got to give yourself time to think, to step away from the tasks, because the tasks will consume you and you'll never make the right strategic decisions, including how you're using digital tools. So that's really number three, is making time. It sounds trite, but it's so true. Put it on your calendar, time to just stop and sit back and think about your business and think about what you ought to be doing differently in your day to day. So, giving yourself that freedom is really critical, I think.
And that sounds like another book, which is Deep Work, that talks a lot about this. Right?
Okay. Yeah.
It's so true. I mean, it's so frustrating because even as a business owner myself, you read this, you're all motivated, you know it's true. And so you start scheduling time to do this stuff and thinking about it. And then 2, 3, 4 weeks later, life gets right back to normal and all these tasks have consumed you again. The other book I'll throw out there, one of my favorites for the longest time, is called Who Moved My Cheese?
Oh,
it's
great
like
one.
this fictitious book. Yeah, it's these two mice in a maze, hem and haw. And they go to their little block of cheese. It's this big fat block of cheese. They go to it every day for years, and they're just like nibbling off the same block of cheese every day, and they're like so fat and happy they don't realize the block is getting smaller and smaller. And like one day they show up and there's no more cheese. And you can either hem and haw, which are great character names about the fact that cheese isn't there any longer. One mouse basically ends up starving to death while the other one goes out and finds a new block of cheese. And
right.
It's weird to think about how this is all still changing so much even in 2022, because I think of e-commerce kind of revolutionizing things 10 years ago. But the reality is that, especially on the B2B side, that hasn't really happened yet. And there's still great opportunities here to take advantage of it. We have one business in particular that does B2B stuff. And just having the stuff available, I mean, the bar is low. It's crazy. Yes. Just having the stuff available.
Yep.
Having a place for them to buy the stuff online in the most frictionless way possible and getting it out the door quickly with no BS wins us so much business.
Right.
The effort is actually really minimal, where on the B2C side, holy crap, is the bar high.
Very
because there's so much competition.
Yes.
Yeah, it's so competitive. And I think there's still so much room left on this side of the fence.
I've got a story in my book, Mike, that talks about a small distributor, and the small would be, I think they're maybe about $8 or $10 million. So, I mean, sizable business, but in the world of B2B, that distribution, that's a relatively small business. They launched e-commerce, this is to your point, maybe 6 years ago. They have almost doubled the business from e-commerce. And it's amazing. And what do? They sell fasteners. This is a commodity product. This is not not a very highly differentiated product. But they did the fundamentals right. They're in SEO. They're on marketplaces. They're in places that, where the customer wants to buy, and their own e-commerce is frictionless. They get on there, you get it, you buy it. It's like a B2C like experience, but accommodating all the B2B workflows, buying on terms, et cetera. But at the end of the day, amazing returns. I mean, the ROI is enormous. And just like you're seeing in B2B, if you do the foundational elements well and apply all the best practices we've learned, in B2C, you can transform a business. It's incredible what can happen. And that example is just one, and you're seeing it too, right? You're not struggling for the next 1 or 2% as you would in consumer.
Yep.
You can double the business in 5 years. Incredible, right? So anyway, yeah, no, it's impactful, and on both sides. On the buy side too. They're using digital to source all kinds of things nowadays.
Absolutely.
So
and the other thing that I see, in that exact, we actually have a business that falls in like you could be talking about us.
Oh, really?
That fastener business. Yeah, it's crazy. It's a commodity, same thing. It's not quite fasteners. It's very close. Mm-hmm. The thing that I've noticed that I really enjoy about the B2B thing more than anything else is because our experience is both for B2C mm-hmm. and B2B. And so the way that we handle the B2B is just offer volume discounts. Mm-hmm. You buy one of these things, it's $9.99 each. You buy 5,000 of them, you can get them down for like 50 cents a piece, kind of thing. The customer who buys one $9.99 one will be the biggest pain in your rear end. They will flame you on every social media channel, want to return it. They want like 3 times their money back for all the inconvenience. Yep. And the B2B guy who buys like $10,000 of this stuff at a time, like you never hear from him. Right. Like you send him an email thanking him for the order, he doesn't even respond. It's just like, it's a totally different world. They're so easy to work with.
They're easy to work with. They appreciate the fact that you're helping them with their business, and they repeat order a lot. If you make it easy mm-hmm. for them to buy again and again and again, and this is true on the buy side, if it's easy for you as a buyer to log into a site, see what you bought the last time and reorder it, and get out of the way of the transaction, you can earn loyalty, and just by removing friction. You're seeing this in your business, and they end up being some of your best customers without having the same level of challenge. I love B2B for that reason. I lived, Mike, in B2C for 17 years, and I love consumers. But at the end of the day, if I can have 10,000 or 5,000 or 100 B2B customers versus 2 million consumers, I'm going to take my B2B customers all day long because they are appreciative. And they repeat order from you all the time if you're doing a good job. So I 100% see that every day. And that's that example in the book too. It's the same thing they're getting, repeat orders. So it's a very profitable business as well.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. All right. Again, I want to be respectful of your time. We're going to run late. It happens. I like to talk too much, but two last things. Sure. I love to end on talking about mistakes to avoid. Mm-hmm. So if you can think of a big mistake to avoid, or maybe there's 2. Let's end there, and then I have one more thing after that I want to talk about, and then we'll let you go.
Yeah, no worries. Yes, mistakes. I've made plenty of them. So, I think, starting 5 businesses, and 3 or 4 of them didn't work, and thankfully I'm in one now that's.
We should start mistakesI've-made.com and work together on this project.
Yeah, I've got lots of them. Yeah. But I would say, one of the biggest mistakes I made in my career was not. It has to going back to the taking time thing, right? I didn't, I'm going back, like 12 years ago, 13 years, a while ago. I've been in this field for a long time. The making a mistake and not taking time to do due diligence on a platform. And this is a mistake I see still happening, particularly in B2B, where folks don't take the time. Thinking about your e-commerce platform selection for a software that you should live with for a decade. And this is a little bit tangential from, the focus of our discussion today. But at the end of the day, I didn't take time to really evaluate. I was a COO of this company. And ultimately, this cost me my job. I did not take enough time up front to really think about the right selection for an e-commerce platform. And what ended up happening was we went through 2 re-platforms, launching an e-commerce site that was a disaster. We had to re-platform again, and it cost the company a lot of money and time, and wasted time. And this, I think, it gets back to the time thing. You've got to take the time up front to really make sure you're doing your due diligence and thinking about decisions like this. It's easy to fall for, this sounds like a great solution, but you got to take time, step back, and really think through your plan. And if it's a big decision like that, don't just fall for what the salespeople are telling you. You've got to really go through a process in some of these things. And again, it gets back to the thing I talked about. So big mistake. And I've learned that, I've got to be deliberate about getting out of my environment, going to take a walk, whatever you have to do to get yourself out of your environment and spend an hour a day just doing something other than sitting at your desk looking at email. So again, getting back, so that was one big mistake I made, and but I learned a lot from it. And what are the signals when you need to step back and really take that time and evaluate something more carefully? So don't do that. If you're launching an e-commerce site, make sure you're really taking your time with understanding what you're getting yourself into and who you're partnering with.
Yeah, and it's tough. I mean, I've made this same mistake because, like you said, the salespeople are good.
Yeah.
Their marketing channels are really good. And it's a little black box-ish. You really can't fully peek under the hood most of the time until you sign the contract and you're a little bit further down the pipe. And so I like the idea of like getting references and talking to other people that are on the platform and seeing it in action through their eyes and the mistakes that they maybe have realized that they've made. And it is expensive and very laborious, like trying to go back and change it again. I've been through it. And so I mean, I think it's definitely spot on advice.
Yeah, Mike, I think the other thing is, being brutally honest, not only about the reality of your business, but also about what you are good at as a person. This took me, by the way, probably 2 decades to learn that I'm best at other things other than operating the nuts and bolts of an e-commerce site. I am best at strategy and sales and marketing and business development and the big picture stuff. And I've learned another thing along the way for me as a business owner is to put other people, partners alongside me. So in every business I now own, and I own several, I have a partner who also owns a business with me who is really good at those things that I'm not good at. And I think that's another thing that took me a long time to learn. Another big mistake was not learning that sooner, right? So learning what your strengths are and really being self-aware is another thing that's critical in business, I think. So another big mistake, but just, again, it's part of life. You learn what you're good at. So I'm not too hard on myself on that one, but it was a key learning for me.
I mean, the unfortunate thing is that even there's 2 guys like bearing their soul, like talking about this on a podcast about how they've done this. A lot of people will still go make the same mistakes. Like a lot of them, you think, I'm not going to fall in the same trap. And I think I was that guy arrogantly one day years ago, thinking the same thing. Hopefully, it'll either us talking about it or some other experiences adding up will help with that, because some of these things are easy things to fall into.
You got to listen to that little voice inside when it's telling you that there's a difference between uncertainty and humility. I think you've got to be humble in business, because those voices will tell you something, right? Not to get creepy or supernatural, but I mean, really listen to your gut. I found it trusting that is important. So.
Yep. All right. So I mentioned one more thing that I wanted to talk about. I mean, you've mentioned it a few times in the podcast so far that you've written a book. So take a minute to plug the book, tell people what the name of it is, what it's about, where they can buy it, and also how they can get a hold of you if they want to chat with you more.
I appreciate that, Mike. Thank you. So the book is $1 Billion B2B E-commerce. If you put a .com at the end, you can find out where to buy it and learn more about the book. It's $1 Billion B2B Ecommerce.com. So it's a mouthful. But really the reason I wrote the book was it's a 400-page book, it's 12 chapters. It's really a playbook for B2B companies to use to bring digital and e-commerce into their business. I talk about, it's mainly oriented towards sellers. So manufacturers, distributors, brands, et cetera, that want to sell. I know we have buyers on the line here too, and you can also learn from this for your business. But e-commerce is really a fundamental part of so many businesses these days. And I wrote the book because I get questions all the time. How do I use e-commerce for my business? I interviewed about 100 companies for it. There's about 35 case studies in the book. And so again, you can just go to the website and buy it. And I'm fortunate to these days do a lot of this kind of thing, podcasts and speaking, and called on by companies to help them understand how to digitize their business. So that's a bit about it. And you can also find my contact information on that site if you want to reach out to me.
Very good. Brian, thank you so much for coming and spending some time with us today. I can't thank you enough. Also, thank you to Alibaba.com for hosting us on this podcast today. It's been fun as always, and best of luck to you out there the rest of the year, and keep in touch.
Great to be here and chat with you.
Thanks, Brian.
Alibaba.com Ecommerce Academy is the official podcast from the Alibaba.com team. Each week on the show, we bring you conversations with industry-leading experts who are using Alibaba.com to build and scale their businesses. These conversations help you explore opportunities through digital global sourcing amidst changing times. and find diversified winning products and leading suppliers on Alibaba.com. Subscribe and be sure to check back for regular episodes.